ladies and gentlemen, to Outlook Business Master Speak. Today we have with us our Gopalakrishnan. He has been there, done that, and having made his mark in two of India's greatest companies, Levers and the Tatas. He's one of the finest minds with respect to strategy and leadership. But what I really love him for is his wit and wisdom, and even better, his catchphrases which nail the point in a way you can never forget. He's going to talk to us today about some reset ideas for business leaders. Gopal, thank you so much for being with us today. While we get ready to listen to you in rapt attention, I want to thank our presenting sponsors, Hyperlink Infosystems and co-sponsor RR Solutions for partnering with us on this. Gopal, all yours. You can talk about your ideas and then we'll take up some questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mahalakshmi. And thought I would use this opportunity provided by Outlook Business to see how we can reset our minds during this forced lockdown that all of us have been through. What do I mean by reset? I think I'm going to start there. By the way, the agenda that I have is first to introduce some of the words like reset and then go on, and I've prepared 6 ideas. But I don't think it will be very interesting to go through all the 6. I'll go through a couple of them and then maybe we can have an interaction, Mahalakshmi. I can go through 2 or 3 ideas. But let me first explain what is a reset idea. A reset idea is when you get back to reality. You know, we all have the ability to be staying and living in the past. It happens to all of us. And to illustrate this, I'm going to tell you a story about a young Japanese guy. His name was Hiroo Onoda. And Hiroo Onoda was born around 1922, and he joined the Emperor's army in 1940 when he was 18 or whatever. And then he was trained to be a very high quality soldier, you know, with alertness and art of warfare. And they airdropped him after training into the Lubang jungle of Philippines. Remember, we are talking about the Second World War times. And he had been instructed that every morning he must get up, he must grease his rifle, and he must wear his goggles, and he must look around left and right and look for the enemy, because no enemy should be allowed to be in that jungle. He did this very diligently because he was trained, and it is something that he wanted to do in the service of the Emperor. But he kept on doing it from 1942 till 1971. The war got over in 1945. He was so focused on what he had to do, on the tasks at hand, that he could not keep in touch with his environment. And any attempt to reach him by his old bosses all failed. Finally, in 1971, when he had eaten probably all the berries available in the jungle, they found him. His boss came to him and he said, "Hey, Hiroo." He said, "Where have you been? Is the war? How's the war going?" He said, "No, it's now 30 years. The war is over. Gone." He said, "Hey, why didn't you tell me?" He said, "Well, they took him back to Tokyo, gave him a hero's welcome." But by this time, remember, he's almost 50 years of age. And then he was given a good retirement in Honshu Island or somewhere. And then he died about 5 years ago, 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's how the story came out in the New York Times. And I read this story with great interest. What an amazing story. That here's a man who's very diligent, doing everything he had been told, keeping very alert and working incredibly hard. But the times had changed and he ended up being a bit irrelevant. And it caught my fancy because there's a bit of Hiroo Onoda in all of us. We tend to be living in the past, like Hiroo Onoda. We do it extremely diligently and then find that we miss the right signals of change that were happening around. So I think occasions like the lockdown give us an opportunity. If Hiroo Onoda had learned meditation in the jungle, he might have said, "Is there some other way to look at this?" We've had such an experience through this lockdown. And I sat down and thought, I've been around 50 years, so a long time. What is it that I would say? I'm not going to come to any new truth. It's not a new gospel that I've arrived at, but reiterating some things that we may be missing. So let me tell you that that's what I mean by a reset idea. I'm trying to break out of this mode in which all of us get. You're so focused on doing that you're on the treadmill, you don't have time to breathe and think, and you lose the wood for the trees. The old days, we said it's an industrial era, then we said it's the data era. We are now in the knowledge era, and that should guide us as to where our priorities can be. To illustrate, when the Pandavas won in the Mahabharata war, it is not that they had any superior knowledge, neither did they have any great superior arms. They had the same elephants and the same, all that they had was a slightly better organization. So they were organized and they were able to win the war. So that's exactly how many centuries later the Persians lost to the Romans. Roman Empire expanded. But if you come to Hiroshima and what happened in the Second World War, it was not just organization, it was superior knowledge and technology that was deployed to bring the war to an end. And so I want to emphasize that acquisition of knowledge requires you to have two things. Curiosity. If you're not curious, you're not going to be successful. And once you're curious, then of course you must go and learn. So I want to go to the principle of ignorance and curiosity. Ignorance is good to admit. We are very hesitant to admit that we are ignorant. Very often you hear people say, I've been around in this industry or this business for 25 years. I pretty much know what I want to know. But that world itself is changing, as the Hiroo Onoda story tells you. So it's this kind of reset that our minds tend to we become slaves to our particular circumstance and we do repetitive tasks. We forget the art of ignorance because it's not a nice thing to admit that we're ignorant. And we cease to be curious, which we last were when we were 2 years old, crawling on our knees in our mother's, our father's home. My first big reset idea, I call them big because it is self-evident and yet we miss it. The first big reset idea I want to present is relearning how to learn. Most people I find, managers, including myself, I'm not sitting on a pedestal, I made these mistakes. We think we know what there is to know. I've done my MBA, I'm from IIT, I've gone to Harvard. And we amazingly lose our ability to learn and our desire to learn. It precipitously falls. And I want to narrate a little story to show you how precipitously it falls. It's a personal story which I think may be helpful. And like the Hiroo Onoda story, and there's a bit of Hiroo Onoda in all of us, this story that I'm telling you will show you that there's a bit of a Gopal in all of us as well. So the year is 1987, 33 years ago, 23 years ago. And I was only 41 years of age and I was appointed to be a director of Hindustan Lever, the director for exports, and it was a big deal. And if you think of 1987, this is pre-liberalization. I don't know how many of the audience can even remember those periods. It was a big deal to be in a multinational company as a director on the board at 41. So I suppose I must have been slightly pompous and arrogant, which I can admit now freely. And all of us tend to get pompous and arrogant in the course of our work and careers. Now, one of the tasks that I had as a director of exports was to deliver 10% of the turnover of my company, Hindustan Lever, through foreign exchange earnings and exports. And since there's a limit to how much of shampoo and toothpaste we could export, we went into all sorts of non-traditional areas. So, leather garments and shoes and carpets and textiles and so on. Now, we knew nothing about all this. You know, you could go to the boardroom of Hindustan Lever and take a tablet of soap, you could open it, smell it and say what's right or wrong with it. If you presented us several t-shirts, apart from being able to wear it, none of us knew anything about it. So we recruited people from outside to help us. But they came from a different cultural context. I'm not saying all of them are bad. Garment industry or footwear industry has as many bad people as the soap industry or any other industry. But they had domain knowledge, but didn't have our culture. We had our culture, but didn't have the domain knowledge. And I thought we'll make a nice fit of this. As it so happens, I made a mistake. Because we recruited a senior experienced person who was absolutely slick, very slick. And one fine morning, we found $700,000 missing. I don't want to go into the details because that will divert us from. But please understand, if you don't remember 1980s, we had a legislation called Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, which was absolutely draconian. If you couldn't find $5, you could go to jail because of criminal offense. And here we were, $700,000 we could find. And for me, the dilemma was, I trusted this man, I gave him the freedom. Has he misused it? If so, why don't I wait another 2-3 days till the facts are clear? Because at the moment, all this happening is my CFO is telling me that the books are not matching with the physical cash. So one instinct on my part was to wait a few days. There was a second instinct that came to me. Just keep quiet, the problem will go. It's like how bank can be a problem that we see nowadays. Just keep quiet, somehow it will solve itself. And the third one was ask for help. Go and say that you've got a mess on your hands. And you know what I did? I did the third one. It took me a lot of effort, but I had to relearn to learn. That's my moral of the story. Because in the first, I don't have to admit I'm a fool. But in the last one, I had to admit I was a fool. I've got tricked under my nose. But it occurred to me, and I had some sagacious advice from some mentors, that it's better to admit you're a fool to a few people than to look like a crook to lots of people. And that's what would have happened. The newspaper headlines would have said, Hindustan Lever director arrested, $700,000 as a big scam. You know how it happens. Once it gets out, it becomes far more. So I walked into my chairman and said, I'm going to look like a fool. This is not the way a dashing Hindustan Lever director is supposed to behave. But I just don't know what's happened. $700,000. Luckily for me, he trusted me, and the whole company, the accounts, the audit, the legal, everybody came together and spent the next 7-8 months. We went to the statutory authorities and said, we have a genuine human error that's happened. Please don't harass us. We just, had a loss of control. I must say, to the credit of the Reserve Bank, Finance Ministry, and all the others involved, that they said we cannot charge you for the genuine error, and the matter was investigated and put to bed, and nothing came in the newspaper, right? And that saved me a lot of embarrassment. And I thought I'm going to get fired. And I deserve to get fired, frankly. I'm a 41-year-old director now looking for a new job. But the company said, when you make a genuine mistake and you come and admit it and help us to solve it, we are not going to fire you. We all make mistakes. So they not only retained me, they actually promoted me and sent me as the chairman of a company in Arabia. So it had a nice little ending. But I mentioned this to you because there are 3 lessons that I learned from this, which are very relevant if you look at the context in which today's Indian economy is. The higher you rise, the more you must discover humility. So the higher you rise, the more you tend to forget humility. That's human nature. It's nothing to do with me or you. So the higher you rise, the more you must rediscover humility. Knowing humility causes you to admit ignorance and therefore seek to relearn. When you make a serious mistake, admit it. Don't cover up. And lastly, never stop learning. And I think all these 3 came together in what I consider to be the most expensive management training course I've attended in my career. I mean, I've been to programs in IIM, in the Management Association, in Harvard Business School, but this one topped it, $700,000. I don't think even Harvard cost my company only $60,000, $70,000 in those days. So I say this is the most expensive management training I've had, where you fell down, cut yourself, admitted your error, somebody helped you to get back on your feet, and luckily I finished. My career was okay, it was not finished at that time. And I would like to say that in this interregnum that we've had with the lockdown, do try to remember your mistakes and try to admit them to yourself and be in an ever-learning mode. So that's the first reset idea I would like to share with you. My second reset idea is what I've called corporate immunology. Immunology is a very nice word for the current situation with COVID, and it brings to our mind that the human body can be immunized. Not for everything, but for many things, as soon as a particular bug or bacteria or virus gets you. So the company also has visible and invisible predators or enemies. Just like human beings have visible or invisible. It's the invisibles that require immunology. The visible ones don't. So what are the company's visible threats? Competition, regulations, inner talent, all that is sort of visible. And they teach you a lot about it in your MBA programs, in your post-management programs, and you're able to keep learning. So what is visible is something that you know how to deal with. They are difficult to deal with, but you get trained and you deal with it. The great problem in human health is the invisible stuff. What toxin is being generated in my stomach? What funny ideas are coming in my brain? Which virus is hitting me? How many times do I have to wash my hand with soap? And so on and so forth. And the company has exactly the same kind of problem. Because the invisible things are things like the ego of the top leadership, the greed of the top leadership. And there are enough examples. I don't have to be indiscreet and quote them. Outlook's business writes about them regularly, so they can give you a litany of them if you want. But the whole message came to me in a very live way recently. Recently, just 3 weeks ago. There is a person called Miss Abigail Disney. That's her name. And she's the granddaughter of Mr. Disney, of Walt Disney, who began Disney World. Mm-hmm. So now she's just a shareholder. She gets dividends, but she's not involved with the company in management terms. And this granddaughter was horrified one day to learn that the top leadership of the Disney World have decided that they will reduce the pay of 100,000 people, workers, but they have done nothing about the executive bonus or the dividends, which is $1.5 billion. And she let fly, in the public domain. She said, and I'm reading, pay the people who make the magic happen. Treat them with respect and dignity. I repeat, pay the people who make the magic happen. Treat them with respect and dignity. If you're not cutting your own and you're cutting them, you're not paying the people, because you're not the guys who make the magic happen. It's they who make the magic happen. And this struck me as very poignant in the current circumstance. Who makes the magic happen? Migrant workers or the non-migrant workers like you and I? And the fact that this whole country has been brought to a grinding halt and is going to, all the industrialists are saying we can't restart. There have been interviews, and some of you might have heard of these. We can't restart it. We don't have the labor. So corporate crisis also comes due to this invisible kind of attacks. And therefore I thought of the word, like you have human immunology, is there something called corporate immunology? And how can you immunize the company? And it struck me that I should study the human immune system as a layman's perspective. I found there was a particular immunologist who's turned to be a management professor, so his interest was very relevant and useful for me. And what he said is the following, and I hope I'm not erring. I'm trying to keep it as simple because I suppose most of you are also lazy. But we have 3 layers of an immune system in our bodies. There's absolutely no logical reason why the human body and the human being should exist, because there are so many bugs and viruses getting us. It's a battle every day. But there is this 3-layer immune system that is protecting us. What is this 3-layer? The first layer is the physical layer, the outer layer, which is our skin, for example. Our skin prevents various things from getting into our body. It repels them, and that's the outer layer. The outer layer equivalent for a company is the passion of its people. You know, when a company is highly engaged people, when they are passionate about their company, that doesn't mean they're always singing hosannas about their company. What it means is they're proud to work for that company. They don't say, "Arey yaar, yahan pe kuch aisa hi hota hai." If somebody asks them, "Shall I join this company? My nephew or daughter wants to apply to this company," they say, "No, no, don't join this crazy company." That's not what passion is all about. So the outer layer of the human body equivalent is the passion. When you see in a company that there's a buzz and people are very involved with what they're doing, that gives you a sense. That's the first immune layer that the outside body has to penetrate. The second immune layer for a human body is what is called the innate layer. Below the physical layer, there's an innate layer. Innate means it's germane to yourself. Your DNA, for example, is what you've inherited. So if there's been diabetes in the family, that might be a weakness in your immune system. And so the company also has the equivalent of an innate, which I call the... Somehow, this is not the done thing here. That is the done thing here. In some companies, cutting costs is the first thing they think of. In some other companies, they say, let's look after the lower level people. The higher level people give up more. These are all matters of culture. So there's passion in the first layer and culture is in the second layer. The third layer, which is there in our human body, is below the innate system, there is a adaptive system. So if a bug manages, like your coronavirus, gets through the front layer because it gets through your nose or your face, that's why you're not advised to touch your face. And if it gets through your innate layer, then it gets into your body, your bloodstream, and then your system has to work. And they recognize a foreign body, and the antibodies come, and there's a Mahabharata war going on our body all the time. In a company, that happens due to what I call positivity. So,
Sorry, what
positivity.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an academic professor of psychology called Barbara Fredrickson, and she's done a lot of work on this. If any of you Googles, you'll find. I'm not an expert on these subjects, but my idea is to trigger your thinking and allow you to follow it or research it further. And she has defined what is positivity and what is negativity. And she has come with a simplistic formula. Most of us have got used to this algorithmic way of managing. She says the positivity divided by negativity is equal to 3 or more. You're on a very good wicket. That means your adaptive system is very good. If people are saying, "Ye sab kuch hone wala nahi hai, ye khatam ho gaya hai," then you get a different ratio and a different response. And if I combine these 3 layers into what I call corporate immunology, I call it people power. People power is equal to passion multiplied by culture multiplied by positivity. And that constitutes the corporate immunology. Most of us are so busy in the course of our day-to-day work, trying to become more efficient, that we forget what it is to be more effective. We pay lip service that people are our great asset, but we don't treat them well. And again, in the space, without my getting critical or inadvertently bordering on the politics, you can see this happen. You see it in your company. Why should you go out and look at politics?
Right.
And I think my second reset idea is, please think about corporate immunology for your company. How do you strengthen with more respect the people power that's available to your company, because that is what is going to be your immune system.
The first question I want to ask you is, you talked about courage. I mean, your first point of reset is really about relearning, and fundamental to relearning is you say that you have to admit and have the courage to say I have erred, or
Cool.
I don't know this, and that's how you go back to square one and say that, okay, how do I now get back on track? Now, especially like you pointed out in your own case, when the stakes are high, for example, you committed a mistake and you're saying you lost $700,000, which is a large amount. It could cost you your job, and that might absolutely jeopardize your career. How do you really muster the courage? Because this is really about at that point in time, it's easier to say in hindsight that that's the way you should be as a third person, or even look back in time and say that this is the way to do it. But at that point in time, it's very hard to come to terms with that. So how do you really weigh? Because however you look at it, you may always think that you are at the losing end if you've done something wrong. For example, most CEOs, don't even have the courage, for example, to go to the board of directors and say that this business doesn't look good. Because, or if you talk about fund managers, they don't have the courage to go out and say that, I want to take in weights in my portfolio which are vastly different from the benchmark index, because that puts you at risk. Because you're looking, if your call goes wrong, then you have to take the flak for it. So career risk is something that everybody faces, whatever job you are in, and I think that's what makes most of us less courageous than we would otherwise find ourselves in. So just in the context of this career risk, how do you really tell yourself that, yeah, this is the way to go about it?
That's a very good question, a sensitive one, and I don't think I have a pat answer to that question. If I say no, be courageous, that's not answering that question. But in the thinking, reflections that I have done, and I think it's to do with authenticity, who you really are. When you peel the onion layers, layer after layer, there's a core you, which is not always revealed through your suited, booted, plushed, carpeted office scenario. And you have to ask yourself. So I don't want to give you the impression that it's an easy decision for me to put my career at risk. Absolutely. I don't want you to think that I was a courageous fellow and I looked squarely at myself in the mirror and said, come on, Gopal, do it now. Nothing of the sort. I was feeling very vulnerable. I could see that I could get sacked. I could see that I would cut a sorry figure with the then prevalent Mahalakshmi type of editors in the newspapers. But I sought counsel. I sought counsel from a more senior director who had been my boss earlier in my career. I said, I'm not sure how to deal with it. I demonstrated, without my intending to do so, a vulnerability that I was willing to ask of another person. And he was the guy who told me, don't try to solve every problem yourself, even if you have created it. Seek help. Go right now. Talk to the chairman. So I think if you must have the vulnerability, then you must be willing to admit your vulnerability. Then you seek counsel. And then my throat was parched. I don't think I should give you the impression I stomped into the chairman's room and I sat there. No, I was very quaking. But I somehow was persuaded that I have to be myself. And the core of me said, you made a mistake, admit it. You look like a fool. Better to look like a fool to 10 people in the company than to 10,000 people through the media. I think those are the sort of factors that pass through my mind. Those leaders, especially in business, in anything, in business, who are not willing to admit that they've put their career at risk, not because of some machismo or anything like that, but you're asking your officers to take financial risks, to take control risks, to take entrepreneurial risks. You're not willing to risk your own career after making a mistake. Doesn't seem right. So I don't know. That was I'm putting it more elegantly now, but at that time it was a horrendous mess. Sure.